Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. Today I'm going to finish off our portion of the combat phase. I'm going through all of the phases that you would do in each turn. We started out with the production phase, and then we had the combat movement phase, and then the combat phase, and I broke it up into a number of different ones so that otherwise it would take hours to do each video, right? But to do the video, and then you would have to search around for the type of combat that you wanted. But this is the last one, and this is about strategic bombing raids, and there are two types of strategic bombing raids. First of all, there's the one that you're probably most familiar with, and that's the one where you try to damage facilities, like you're damaging factories or naval bases or air bases, like that. You're just dropping bombs on them and trying to damage the facilities in there. But there's also carpet bombing. That's a different type of strategic bombing in this game, and that's where you would go in and you would attack ground units. Because in this game, strategic bombers are not the same as they are in Axis and Allies. In this game, they don't do normal combat. So, like, you're never going to see a strategic bomber go out into the ocean and bomb a battleship. Like, they don't take part in naval combat whatsoever, and it's very limited in what they do in land combat, and that it's limited to carpet bombing. And we'll get into carpet bombing afterwards. But first, I want to show you the kind where you damage facilities. So first, let's introduce our bombers. Okay, so that you've got your regular strategic bomber, and that's this one right here. Let's just move these out, it'll make them easier to see. So this is a Russian bomber right here, and this is from Axis and Allies, their strategic bomber. And what he does for damage is he does 2d6. So you take two six-sided dice and you would roll them. So they're like two six-sided dice, and you roll them, and whatever the number comes out to, so there's 9. That would be a damage of 9 on that, right? And then you also have a medium bomber. So a medium bomber in this game is kind of like a tactical bomber in Global 40. A tactical bomber in Global War 36 is vastly different in this game than it is in Axis and Allies. It's more of a traditional role for the tactical bomber in like it's making ground attacks. It'll fight naval units, and it'll fight ground units. It's not as good against air units. That would be what you use fighters for. But when it comes to bombing facilities and stuff like that, it's like they just didn't want to put in that extra sculpt for Axis and Allies, and so they just said, okay, well, the tactical bomber's going to do that. But really, that's not what their role was. That was the role of the medium bomber, and this is the Russian medium bomber. And there's different types of medium bombers, different sculpts for each nation. If you get them all different, like you can get all the same one if you wanted, I guess, and just painted them. But this would be the Russian one that you get from historical board gaming. Then there's a third type, and that is when you develop heavy bombers. And this one here happens to be from historical board gaming. This is an American heavy bomber, and I've painted it up in the Russian color because there was no sculpt available. So I guess what I'm saying is that the Americans lend-leased these to the Russians before the game even began. And so a heavy bomber, what it would do, before I get to that, the medium bomber, it does 1 d6 worth of damage. Like we got 2d6 on the strategic bomber, 1d6 on the medium bomber, and the heavy bomber is 3d6 worth of damage. So you could really do a lot of damage with that. Like there's 10 right there, and that wasn't even a very good roll, right? So that's how you would damage facilities with these things, is by using the number of dice. And you can use any one of these 3 bombers for a strategic bombing raid. As far as carpet bombing, you don't use the medium bomber for that. You would only use strategic bombers, either the heavy or the regular strategic bomber for carpet bombing. And we'll get into carpet bombing in a couple minutes. So Strategic bombing. First, what we're going to do is we're going to set that up. Okay, so you would first move your units in for the bombing rate. And what I've done in a few videos ago now, seems like forever, what I did was I flew them in from Vladivostok here. There's an air base here, and it doesn't matter, there's only 2 spaces. The ships don't block your movement whatsoever. So they flew in there. I flew all 3 of these bombers in here I've got, let's just move them out here though and make it easier to see, okay? But just know that all of these bombers are in Japan. So I flew those 3 bombers and 4 fighters. This fighter here is a little bit different. It's just an early war fighter for the Russians. It's kind of a cool little scope. Anyway, so this is these guys are all going in on the bombing raid. And what the fighters are for is to protect the bombers, right? Like, because the other guys, they can send up interceptors. So these are called escorts, and you can only use fighters. You can't use any other type of aircraft for an escort. So you've got your bombers, and then you've got your escorts. But then the reason you need escorts is because you can have interceptors. And it's up to the defender whether or not he wants to use interceptors. Just because they have fighters in the zone that you're attacking, the facilities at, doesn't mean that they have to use them. Like, you take a look at this, and all of these planes are like, if you do send up interceptors, then all of the planes are going to fight each other at a reduced value. So we have 4, 5, 6, 7 planes here. And so if you're only got 1 fighter, then your 1 fighter is probably going to get slaughtered, right? So you wouldn't send up you wouldn't send up any interceptors unless you were certain that you could do some damage to them, right? So we happen to have 4 fighters in here. We have 3 fighters, and we have a jet fighter. Now, a jet fighter is also something that can be used, and that's technology. You have to develop jet fighter technology. Here's the jet fighter here for the Japanese. You have to develop that technology, and if you do, then you can use that as an interceptor or as an escort, if you had it for an escort. So the Japanese, for the sake of argument and this video, they're going to send up these 4 interceptors to try to stop this bombing raid. And I had to wait a little while because I wasn't certain when I was reading the rules, because you have to decide which targets you're going after. You don't just go in and bomb the whole territory, right? You have to pick a specific facility with each bomber. So I was wondering, okay, did you have this plane go with this bomber and these 2 planes go with this bomber? What do you do, right? So I texted Will, and he said, no, 1 big fight. So these guys are going to have 1 big fight, and it only lasts for 1 round. And then after that, then the bombers are going to decide which targets they're going after, and they're going to try to bomb those targets. They could all go after the same targets, or they could pick different targets and go after them, and then they will go after them, and we'll get to that afterwards. But let's do the big fight first. So there's interception values, right? And what you will see that on your cards here. Let's just take a look here. So here you got your Japanese card, right? And this works for attack. Well, you'll see there's attack and defense, but the numbers are the same. So let me just, I'll set this down so I can point to it. Okay, so here is your air units, right? Now it says a fighter attacks and defends at 6, but then in brackets it's got another number there. It's got a 3, right? So that means that the number in brackets is the interception value. So there's 3 on them, and there's a 1 on the medium bomber, 1 on the strategic bomber. Here's the heavy strategic bomber down here. That's a 2, and the jet aircraft, that's a 5. So their interception is actually 5. So what that means is that all of these bombers and all of these fighters are gonna roll 1 dice each, and they're going to try to take casualties. So all of the fighters, they will roll at 3 or less, and there's 3 fighters over here. The jet fighter will roll at 5 or less. These 2 bombers will roll at 1 or less, and the heavy bomber will roll at 2 or less. And that's, that's their strength, their estimated strength in, air-to-air combat, right? So before any of the bombing takes place, we take out the dice and let's use the white dice for the Russians. So they've got 4 fighters, right? So we're going to roll 4 fighters, and you're using 12 d12s for these. So 4 fighters at 3. That's 1 hit. So it's 3 or less, right? So that's 1 hit. And then you've got 2, the medium bomber and the strategic bomber at 1. Oh, there's another hit, so that's 2. And then we've got the heavy bomber at 2 or less, and that's a miss. So the Russians got 2 hits. Now we have the Japanese, and they have 3 fighters and 1 jet fighter. So we got 3 fighters at 3, and those are all misses. And we have 1 jet fighter at 5 or less, and that's a miss. So the Japanese did not intercept very well there. Okay, so what that means is that they've got 2 casualties. Now the Japanese are going to have to lose 2 casualties. So obviously the jet fighter is worth a lot more than so they're going to lose these 2. Now if the Russians had lost 1, then they could choose whatever they want for a casualty. You know, they've got 1 casualty, just like in any kind of combat, really. The person taking the casualty gets to choose. You definitely wouldn't want to choose this one because that's an expensive unit, right? Probably what you would choose in this case here, I would think, would be the fighter, right? So let's just take a fighter off. Say the Japanese got a hit. You know, they didn't, but let's just say they did. You would lose a fighter. Okay, now the bombing run takes place. And so let's just bring these facilities out here. Let's get rid of these guys. Now none of this is taking place in the ocean. We just we need to be able to see what we're doing. So these are the different facilities that are in there. Okay, there's also a railway in there, but we'll get to railways afterwards. You can also damage a railway. So you could try to bomb the factory, or you could try to bomb either one of the shipyards, or you could try to bomb the airbase. Well, not try, I mean you're going to bomb them. The factory is, the factory can take 20 points of damage there, and we've been over the damage on these things. So I think what I might want to do is take this against that, and it depends like what we want to limit them from doing. You know what I mean? Do we want to limit their shipyards, or do we want to limit their ability to scramble aircraft? You know, it depends on what else is happening in the game. Are the Americans about to attack? Is that why? Are we just helping them out? Like, do we want to prevent the Japanese from building capital ships? Do we want to prevent them from scrambling? You know, but let's just say that they're going to go after a shipyard and an airbase. Okay. The shipyard that's out here, you have to specify which shipyard, obviously, right? And we'll go after the airbase with this one. Now, what happens next? If you're looking for this in the rules, there's a chart here on page 47, right? Okay, so we did the interception. Now, the anti-aircraft and facility damage. Bombers inflict damage, and attacking units are subject to anti-aircraft fire from the inherent facility guns if strategic bombing, or from all regular anti-aircraft guns in the zone if carpet bombing. We're not carpet bombing, we're doing facility damage here. So, what I was looking for from Will when I texted him today was, does the anti-aircraft fire first, and then if the bomber is lost, then it doesn't get to roll? And that's not the case. Basically what happens is this guy drops his bombs and the anti-aircraft fire, so it's basically simultaneous. So you will get to drop your bombs regardless of what happens, and they will get to use their anti-aircraft guns regardless of what happens. Now each anti-aircraft gun can only fire 3 times, so a maximum of 3 shots. In Axis and Allies, that was a little different for the facilities anti-aircraft, in that they could fire as many as you had planes going in there. But if you had like 5 planes going in against this factory here, it still only gets 3 shots. If you only had 2 planes going in, then it would only get 2 shots, right? You don't get to automatically get 3. So in this case, we're taking 1 bomber in, and so it's going to get 1 shot at you. And I believe anti-aircraft are at 3. Let me just take a quick look here. Anti-aircraft. Yeah, defense at 3. So you get to roll the dice at 3, and that would be a D12, right? So these guys, let's just do the damage first. We're going to go after that factory. So we've got 3 dice because that's the one with the heavy bomber. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 damage on the factory, and these guys get one dice with the anti-aircraft gun trying to hit a 3 or less, and they missed. So what happens is we put that many chips underneath the factory to show damage, okay? Let me just grab the chips here. Now I use the orange chips for 5s and the black chips for 3s, or sort of for 1s. So I've got 1 orange chip and 3 black chips. How very Halloween of me. So we'll put these over here, and we'll put this over here as well. These are done over here. And this one didn't get attacked over here. We're attacking the base, this naval base over here on this side. Okay, so then we have the strategic bomber going against the naval base. So he does 2 dice worth of damage, and he got 11. Wow, that's big time. And they get that aircraft gun, and they missed. So far from the truth on that one. So 11, but there is a maximum damage that you can do on those. Hang on a sec, I'm going to look that up. I don't want to do it on camera here. I forgot what the max was on there. Okay, I was pretty sure that I knew the answer to my own question, but I just wanted to make certain. It only took me a second there to look it up. It is 5 points. So on any kind of base, whether that's a shipyard, a naval base, or an air base, then it is 5 points of damage is the maximum. So even though we hit it with an 11, we can only take 5 points of damage on there. So we'll put the 5 chip underneath there to show that that has a damage on it. Now with your bases, they don't get to build anything with any damage on them. So if there is even 1 point of damage on that shipyard, you don't get to use that shipyard. It doesn't make your boats go an extra space, and you can't build anything at that shipyard because of that. And with your factories, like that particular factory there can build 5 units, right? With each point of damage on there, though, that reduces the number of units you can build. With 8 damage on there, then it can't build any units, right? So if you were to pay 4 on your repair damage phase, and that's the beginning. We've already been over this in an earlier video. But if you were to repair 4 points of damage, then it would be down to 4, and then you could build 1 unit at that factory, right? But with the bases, though, any damage whatsoever, and it doesn't get to play anymore. Not until you repair it. Okay, so then we got the medium bomber against the air base. And so also that would be a reason why you don't really need a heavy bomber against one of those bases, right? Because that's kind of overkill, right? You can't really damage it more than, like, you're rolling an awful lot of dice to just roll damage at 5 points, right? So anyway, let's go and try to damage that air base there. So only 2 points of damage on the air base. And let's try to shoot that thing down at 3 or less, and they missed. So Japan's not doing good here. This has been a pretty darn successful run here. Not only did they damage a total of 8, 9, 10, 15. They damaged 15 points, plus they shot down 2 fighters. So that wasn't so good for the Italians, right? Okay, so that's done now. Then everybody flies back, so these guys are back here. The fighters fly home, and before you go on a raid, you have to be able to fly back. Like you can't go too far so that you can't land in a friendly zone, right? So when all of your attacks are done and it's time to fly home or fly to a friendly landing spot, then you fly back and you fly your bombers back as well, right? and then you're done. And that's what it looks like afterwards. So yeah, that's a lot of damage there that you did. And also, like when I was talking earlier about if you should send your fighters up or not, like I wouldn't necessarily have sent just 4 fighters up against that many planes, right? There was 7 planes against only 4, and so I might have just said, no, you know what? I'm not going to send my planes up. I'm not going to try to intercept them. But I did, just to show you what would happen, and you can see what would happen if you choose to do it that way, right? So there is another kind of bombing raid, and it's called carpet bombing. And this is the only way that a strategic bomber can take part in land combat. And again, like I said, it does not take part in naval combat. So we've got a Japanese bomber here. They're going to go and they're going to try to get their revenge. Now they can try to bomb one of 2 things. They can try to bomb units, or they can try to bomb a railway. I guess a railway would not be carpet bombing. So yeah, before we get to carpet bombing, let's just talk about the railway. So this bomber here can come in, and you can use either one of the strategic bombers. So you can use a regular one or a heavy one. You can't use a medium bomber actually, you can for bombing a railway. Sorry, you can, but what you can't use is a medium bomber for carpet bombing. That's right. Sorry, I confuse myself sometimes. Anyway, the only defense against trying for this guy coming in here and trying to bomb a railway, because unlike the other facilities, a railway does not have its own anti-aircraft gun. So if you had built an anti-aircraft gun and there's one sitting in that territory, then that anti-aircraft gun can fire at the bomber. And again, it's a simultaneous thing. So the bomber's going to drop its load, and the anti-aircraft gun's going to fire. The other thing is that you can intercept it as well if you had a fighter in that territory. But then again, they can always bring in their fighters as well, right? For escorts. So if you wanted to damage a railway, then just bring in like 2-3 fighters if they only had 1 fighter, and they're just going to say, you know what, go for it. I'm not going up there. You can go ahead and take your best shot, right? And so anyway, you would roll. In this case, it would be, because you got a regular strategic bomber, you would roll 2 dice, and you would damage that railway. Just 1 second. I think there's a maximum on railways. Let me just look that up too. Okay, so what it is for the maximum damage is that you can damage a railway up to its rail capacity. You don't need to damage it further than that. Each point of damage reduces the rail capacity by 1. So in Russia here, like in different places on the map, you have different rail capacities, right? And we'll get into that in the next part, the next phase, and that's non-combat. I'll do a video on railways. So what you would do, let's say that you came in here with that bomber and you damaged it too. They weren't able to shoot you down. Then you would just put your damage markers down. There's 2 damage markers, and then they've got these markers you can get. They're damage rail markers. Or you can just use the regular rail markers. Or if you don't have any of those, then you could just write it down. Say the damage in that territory there is this much, right? You need to keep track of it, just so you know, because you might not repair it right away. You might not repair it for 3 turns or something. Then when you do want to go to repair it, then you got to try to remember, what was that again? You know, what was the damage on that? But like this would be the best way, just to put your damage. Oh, that's 10, isn't it? Sorry, needed black markers. So yeah, I would put black markers down. There we go. So there's 2 points of damage, 2 black markers. There we go. And so you just have to keep track of it, right? So that's damaging railways by strategic bombing. And the last thing is carpet bombing. Let's move a few units in here. So we'll get a horse and we'll get this guy and we'll get this guy. Let's move this back. Let's get this guy. So this is what we have in here. And you have, and you can only use strategic bombers or heavy strategic bombers for this, right? So you got nothing else to do with this bomber here. Might as well come over here. You got to be at war to do this, obviously, or you have to declare war at the very least. So what you can do is go in and say, I'm going to carpet bomb these guys. Now, carpet bombing only takes one turn. You can't just keep bombing them over and over and over again until they're all gone. So basically, what it is these guys are at very high altitude, and they're just it's not easy to hit the people down there. They're just dropping their bombs and hoping they land on something, right? It wasn't an exact science. So with a strategic bomber, you're going to get 3 D12s. With a heavy bomber, you're going to get 5 D12s. And what we're looking at here, we don't have any anti-aircraft guns, and we don't have any fighters in this territory. So we're just going to roll 3 dice, trying to get a 2 or less. And you see that? We got a 1. That means that that the Russians have to lose a unit. So they'll just lose their cheapest unit. They'll lose this dude. It's up to the Russian player to decide which. And then that's over. Now this guy flies, you know, after all his combat is done, then he does his non-combat movement and he flies back to a friendly space. But the other thing, like if you had an anti-aircraft gun in there, so again, the same thing's going to happen. You're going to roll for that, but that guy's also going to roll a dice. So you're going to roll your 3 dice, and there's a 2, so you got 1 hit. And he's going to roll a dice at 3, and he missed. So same thing happened. But you could lose this if you wanted, or you could lose this. You know, you could lose whatever you wanted, right? And then again, they could have a fighter in there, so they could try to intercept that bomber. And if that was the case, like if it was just this bomber against this fighter, then they would do at their intercept values. So this rolls at 1, this rolls at 3. So we'll roll the bomber first, and that missed, and we'll roll the fighter at 3 or less, and that missed. Okay, so now this guy's out of the fight. Now there's still that gun there, so he's going to roll his 3 dice, and the gun is going to roll its 1 dice. So the bomber missed, and the gun at 3 or less hit him. He got a 3, so that bomber's dead. Now in this case here, I would not just bring a bomber against these things here with a fighter and an anti-aircraft in there. That would just be too dangerous. Like, bombers cost a lot of money, right? So I wouldn't hang them out to dry like that. If I had a fighter, then I might do that, because then at least I got a better chance of taking out his fighter and 1 or 2 other units, right? And you know, it's could be a cost to me as well, but at least I've got a better chance of taking units off of him, and not just him having a better chance at taking units off of me. There's nothing forcing you to carpet bomb a territory, so if you don't have an easy territory to carpet bomb, and you don't have any strategic bombing that you can do, you know, like they've got their factories and things all protected wherever your strategic bombers can reach, then don't do anything. Just leave your bomber. There's no sense in forcing yourself to lose it, right? If you've got a chance that they've got a better chance of hitting you than you have of hitting them. Anyway, so that's all about strategic bombing. And you know what? I'll make a separate video. There's one more video. I was going to tack it on to the end, but it would be kind of weird to do that. So I'll do another video about the outcomes of all these bombings, or all these different types of attacks. It's called Combat Aftermath. But that is the end of this video. This is how you do strategic bombing. Take care, everyone. General Hand Grenade out.